when a pilot sank a submarine to avenge a friend. The tragedy in the deep. The sea was calm that morning. The USS Lancaster, a fast attack submarine, patrolled the Atlantic depths on a classified mission. Commander Jake Reynolds, a seasoned officer, stood in the control room, monitoring the sonar. His best friend, Lieutenant Scott "Hawk" Harris, was on the surface, piloting an F/A-18 Hornet, providing aerial reconnaissance. For years, Jake and Scott had been inseparable, both joining the Navy together, rising through the ranks, and sharing a bond like brothers. Then, the unthinkable happened. A rogue submarine, later identified as the Russian Victor-class Varyag, fired a torpedo at the USS Lancaster. The explosion rocked the vessel, sending it into a spiral of destruction. The emergency alarms blared, and the crew scrambled, but it was too late. Within minutes, the Lancaster was gone, swallowed by the abyss. Scott, flying above, could do nothing but watch in horror as his best friend and 120 other men perished. He listened helplessly as Jake's final words crackled through the radio. "It's been an honor, brother. Find them. Make them pay." Then, silence. Scott clenched his jaw, rage coursing through his veins. The attack was unprovoked. The enemy sub had disappeared into the deep. There was no declaration of war. No warnings. Just a cold-blooded execution. And Scott Harris swore vengeance. The hunt begins. Scott returned to the aircraft carrier USS Valor, consumed by grief and fury. The brass dismissed the attack as an unfortunate incident in disputed waters. Diplomats scrambled for a solution, avoiding escalation. Scott, however, didn't care for politics. He wanted blood. He spent the next few weeks obsessively studying every report on the Varyag. It was a stealth submarine, one of the deadliest ever built. It had vanished without a trace, deep beneath the ocean. The Navy had no concrete plan to find it. But Scott had one. Reaching out to an old intelligence contact, he learned that the Varyag had surfaced briefly near a covert refueling point in the North Atlantic. It was preparing for another strike, possibly against another U.S. vessel. Scott knew no one would authorize a direct retaliation. But he didn't need permission. He just needed a plan. A man against a monster. With the help of a trusted crew, Scott volunteered for an aerial surveillance mission over the North Atlantic. But he had no intention of merely reporting his findings. Strapped into his Hornet, he scanned the waters below, looking for any sign of the Varyag. Then, sonar pinged, faint but unmistakable. The submarine was moving. Scott radioed back false information, claiming no contact. If he alerted command, they would order him to stand down. But this wasn't their fight. This was his. His heart pounded as he descended lower, switching to infrared sensors. He saw it, the shadowy outline of the Varyag, lurking just beneath the waves. Scott's breath hitched. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. But how do you sink a submarine from the air? The answer lay in his payload, Mk-62 quick-strike mines. They weren't meant for deep targets, but could devastate a submarine at periscope depth. He just had to force it up. Scott fired his first round, sonobuoys. The Varyag would now know they had been detected. It had two choices: descend deeper into hiding or surface to fight. As he had predicted, the Varyag surfaced. The Russians thought they were dealing with a routine surveillance craft. They had no idea what was coming. The reckoning. The submarine's hatch opened. Crew members scrambled onto the deck, manning anti-aircraft turrets. Scott had seconds to act. He banked left, dodging tracer fire, and dropped two quick-strike mines. They splashed into the water, sinking toward the sub's hull. Then, boom! One of the mines detonated, ripping through the submarine's stern. Smoke and flames erupted from the vessel as it listed sideways, struggling to remain afloat. But Scott wasn't done. Circling back, he lined up for a second attack. His hands were steady, his mind clear. He wasn't just avenging his best friend. He was ensuring no one else would suffer at the hands of the Variag. He fired a direct missile strike. The impact was devastating. A fireball erupted, sending debris flying. The Variag began sinking, its crew leaping into the frigid ocean. Scott watched as the submarine that had taken everything from him disappeared beneath the waves, consumed by the very depths it had once ruled. The aftermath. Scott returned to the Valor in silence. The mission report simply read, "Hostile submarine engaged. Threat neutralized." No one questioned him. No one reprimanded him. Some suspected what had happened. Some even approved. But nothing was ever officially recorded. Scott stood alone on the deck that evening, staring at the endless ocean. He felt no joy, no triumph, just a hollow sense of closure. The sea had taken his best friend. Now it had taken his enemy. And the balance had been restored. The legend lives on. Years later, Scott's story became legend among pilots and sailors. The pilot who avenged a friend. The man who sank a submarine from the sky. No medals were awarded. No official accounts existed. But those who served knew the truth. Justice had been served. And in the deep, where shadows once lurked, there was silence.